This PowerPoint is additional remarks on the compare contrast paper for basic information about what the paper is about and how to go about writing the paper. Please view the videos in week 13 if you haven't already done that. That's where you're going to find the meat of the information about this. These are just some additional remarks based on some conversations I've had with students this week about the paper. And what I want to emphasize in this particular slideshow is that you have choices as you write this. The compare-contrast strategy of writing offers a writer a lot of flexibility, and you can take a completely narrative approach to this by just telling two stories, or you can take a more analytical approach to this by analyzing two sets of circumstances and looking for their similarities and differences. Or you can define something cultural in two different ways based on two different cultures. Lots of flexibility, and there are no prescriptions for this other than the two basic requirements of the paper, which are to compare some aspect of Hmong culture or history with some aspect of the culture or history of another group, and to use two sources while doing so. And those sources can also be a variety of sources. They don't have to be traditional academic sources. So as long as we're talking about choices, let me just review a couple concepts from earlier in the trimester. Writers engage in making rhetorical choices all the time and throughout the whole writing process. And rhetoric is defined as the art of speaking or writing effectively to achieve a particular purpose with a particular audience. And note it does say art, meaning that there is a lot of the writer that goes into a particular work. It's your own heart, your own experiences, your own history, your own analysis that you put into that paper. There's no scientific prescription for what needs to be in there. And you will make choices and you will employ strategies. So the basic questions that any writer approaches a project with start with these two things. Who's your audience and what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to inform them, persuade them, entertain them, inspire them? And after you've decided about that, then you have to ask another question. What's the most effective way to do this? And you first need to decide on the genre. Are you going to write a memo, a report, an essay? Are you going to craft a meme, develop a chart, write a novel? It all depends on what your purpose is. And within those purposes, there are going to be certain strategies that you use. And these are the rhetorical strategies that we've been experimenting with this trimester. You can write stories. Sometimes that's the best way to make something clear to an audience. You can describe something. You can define something, analyze it, classify it, compare and contrast it. And often a combination of those strategies is most effective. So with your particular essay, you already know who your audience is. It's college students. And what do we know about college students? They want new and novel information. They want you to teach them something that they don't already know because they don't have patience to read things that they already know. And when you're talking about history and culture, chances are your audience probably knows a lot of the same things that you do. But what will be new and different are the stories that you tell and the examples that you use to help your readers develop a deeper understanding. And that is part of the purpose, to help your readers understand and appreciate these two different cultures. I suggest, if you feel stuck about this essay at all, that you revisit chapter 3 in the River Reader and read more than just that one essay that you read out of that chapter. Because what you'll find is that different writers approach the compare-contrast strategy in different ways. And a couple other things to note if you revisit that chapter. Note that the essays don't stick to kind of a formulaic ping pong of compare contrast. They don't use the same exact wording for each particular thing that they're comparing. And they don't use the same exact kind of examples. And then note the heavy emphasis on narrative and description, and then decide what strategies that you're going to use as you develop this essay. And a lot of that you'll find in your brainstorming. I want to spend just a couple minutes looking at Mark Twain's essay, Two Views of the River, to show you how he did some things. And first, we're going to look at his introduction. Right away in the introduction, he lets us know what he is comparing and what his point of comparison is. We know from the context of this essay, which was given to us in the head notes, that this is just a chunk out of a book that he wrote. We know that he is talking about being a steamboat pilot. So here he begins this passage. Now, when I had mastered the language of this water and had come to know every trifling feature that bordered the great river as familiarly as I knew the letters of the alphabet, I had made a valuable acquisition. But I had lost something too. I had lost something which could never be restored to me while I lived. All the grace, the beauty, the poetry had gone out of the majestic river. And so, even though he doesn't come out and say, I am comparing and contrasting my view of the river before I was a pilot with my view of the river after I was a pilot. He doesn't need to bore us with that announcement. Instead, he shows us with this very lyrical language that that's what he's comparing, those two views of the river. And he's got a little bit of his thesis here too. All the grace, the beauty, and the poetry had gone out of the majestic river after he became a pilot. And he does stick to the compare-contrast format. He's only using one point of comparison. In your essay, you may have two or three, or maybe you'll only have one. But his point of comparison is how he viewed the river. And he chooses description to illustrate this point. And here are two passages. I still keep in mind a certain wonderful sunset which I witnessed when steamboating was new to me. A broad expanse of the river was turned to blood. In the middle distance, the red hue brightened into gold, through which a solitary log came floating, black and conspicuous. In one place, a long, slanting mark lay sparkling upon the water. And then later in the essay, he describes the very same scene. Then, if that sunset scene had been repeated, I should have looked upon it without rapture, and should have commented upon it inwardly in this fashion. The sun means that we're going to have wind tomorrow. That floating log means the river is rising, small thanks to it. That slanting mark on the water refers to a bluff reef, which is going to kill somebody's steamboat one of these nights, if it keeps stretching out like that. So same view of the river, very different description. And then more of his reflection comes at the end of the essay after he's done his comparison. No, the romance and the beauty were all gone from the river. All the value any feature of it had for me now was the amount of usefulness it could furnish towards compassing the safe piloting of a steamboat. Since those days, I have pitied doctors from my heart. And then there's a passage I haven't put here, but he goes on to describe what doctors do. And then we come to the end where he's reinforcing his thesis again. He's talking about doctors. Does he ever see her beauty at all? Or doesn't he simply view her professionally and comment upon her unwholesome condition all to himself? And doesn't he sometimes wonder whether he has gained most or lost most by learning his trade? And that thesis in itself is kind of subtle. He doesn't come out hit us over the head with it, but he's leaving us with a reflection that we need to think about. So one way of doing a compare-contrast essay. One other comment I want to make about this is, again, to reinforce the idea that this essay is going to be evaluated a little bit differently than previous ones, where we focused on content, organization, paragraphing, etc. This is going to focus primarily on the competency of editing, and most of the points, you note 40 points out of 100, are here: sentence skills, grammar, and mechanics. And so you'll probably want to put more of your effort actually into the editing of this than you would do in the writing. Well, that's not true, but focus on the editing. And fortunately, editing is the easy part of the writing process, and there's lots of ways to get help with that. So I wouldn't stress about that. So again, don't stress about this. Know that you have lots of choices and know that you can do this. And I'm happy to help and happy to talk with you.